Hi, welcome to Healing Humanity. My name is Dina, and I want to talk to you today about realizations, new realizations. So, I've said before, God put it on my heart to start talking about Him and His kingdom, which is fine. It's never easy because I'm not a pastor. I was raised to 12 years old in the church, but then after I was on my own, I never went to church. I didn't take my children to church, unfortunately, and I had a lot of guilt on that, but I didn't. There wasn't. I, I just didn't make the time for it, and when I did want to, my ex-husband, as he knows, he didn't want to go, and so it was just always this awkward situation, like you want to go but you don't. But when you start walking with God, you start realizing just how much of a purpose you have in His kingdom and why you're walking with Him. And that's what I want to talk to you today. So, I'm being pressed to tell you what has been realized in my life. So, for my whole life, I used to make these jokes. Oh, I'm going to be here forever. I'm not going to die. I'm going to be here forever. It's crazy, right? I didn't realize that there was, everlasting life. I didn't realize that there was heaven. I didn't realize that some of the things that I was saying were actually maybe not physically possible, but spiritually possible. So that was realization number one. Then realization, so many, but another one that came was that I remember telling my mom that I remember being able to see out of her belly button when I was a little girl. I was very little, beginning to talk, and I remember telling her that I was in her belly and I could see out her belly button, and told her about, I think, situations, if I remember correctly. It was kind of bizarre. And I didn't give it much weight at the time, but the more that I listened to some other people whose children are very awake as they are coming, into the world, that they are very aware of their spiritualness. They're very aware of their past lives. They're very aware of, they're just telling stories. They have a connection to God, and they're telling stories that just in reality don't make a whole lot of sense, right? And I think that probably scared my mom because she didn't want me to talk about it anymore. But I remember that very clearly. And I look at that and I listen to some of these other children that are being born nowadays, within the last, what's the oldest one? I think the oldest one is 14 that I've heard. And so I listen to that and I'm like, oh, they're saying things like what I said when I was younger. That's great, And so I feel like I was not led spiritually the way that I could have been. I was, you grow up in the, when I did Gen X, you were basically told to be quiet, go outside and be quiet. So spirituality was not something that we discussed, at least not in my household anyway. We barely talked about Jesus, let alone anything else. But, when you realize these things, you look at the world completely differently, right? When you start to see the synchronicities, when you start to see the patterns, when you start to realize that there's meaning behind certain things that are in your life, there's even meaning sometimes, not always, but sometimes in your name. And that's an amazing realization, don't you think? When you dive deep, you realize that there has got to be, without a doubt, some grand master that's designing plans and making things happen, because this could not happen on its own. I have been out here as this is another thing. I always wanted to. When I was in college, my first college degree, I earned an associate's in criminal justice, and I loved the information, loved the subject, loved a lot of that, and had intended to be a private investigator. And I feel like God has sent me out into the world as his private investigator. You know, I did a small stint with a private investigator for a short time after graduating college, and that was okay. It was fun enough, but I really feel like the bulk of what I've done over the last 10 years has been for our Heavenly Father, and he has sent me out. And like I said, I've been a mystery unto myself for 10 years. And I think he did that purposefully, because anyone in their right mind would not want to walk the path that I am walking, not on purpose. But I am. And I look sometimes and I have to laugh, because in a way, like just yesterday, I realized that I've been God's PI. And that's like, to me, that's amazing, because I didn't plan it that way. I had nothing to do with it. I was just out here living my life, stressed out, immensely uprooted, and not happy whatsoever. Sometimes afraid, sometimes happy, sometimes so frustrated, sometimes really angry, sometimes very, very curious. And yet, in the end, it sort of all makes sense. It's just bizarre. And some of these things that I'm telling you about, like, realizing that you were you had an awareness as you were entering your mother. There's an awareness and a consciousness that has a memory. It's an amazing thing, and then to live your life in a way that, when you start to live your life, mind you, in a way that honors God, he uses you, if you allow him to, and will show you things that you won't see if you don't walk that path. And the thing is that it's available for everyone. And that's what I keep trying to tell you, is that, I was never somebody that would, I loved talking about religion, loved talking about politics, both of which, are my favorite topics to talk about. I don't think that we can have a good relationship with someone if we cannot talk about those things respectfully, right? And so most of my life, although I talked about God and I did not honor God, but I did talk about him, but I acted as a sinner. I was never perfect, by far. I was by far perfect. And so it's amazing to me that God chose me, and he can choose you too. He chooses all of us. In the Bible, it says in Philippians, I think it's Philippians 2, somewhere in there, it says, upon Jesus' return, every knee will bow. And the Bible doesn't mince words. It may play a little bit of a verbal salad sometimes, but it doesn't mislead at all. There's nothing in there that's a lie. Not that I've seen or heard. And so if every knee will bow, you have to look around yourself and say, every knee. If what she's saying is true, and every knee will bow, and if her life was purposefully created, what could my life become? Who am I in this kingdom? Am I somebody that can build the kingdom and work with God? Or am I working against God? Because if you're working against God, know that in the end, every knee will bow. Now, you may bow because you are honoring Christ, or You may bow because you're sorrowful for the things that you've done and you're not going to be able to go into the kingdom with him. I want you to see the reality of what I'm trying to tell you. I want you to see that for thousands of years, think about this, right? Thousands of years. You can't even count back probably the number of generations that have gone on in your family to allow you to be here and sit here and listen to me right now. How many people have come before you since Jesus? A lot. A lot. On both sides. For you to be here right now, for you to have the opportunity to live in this day and age and in this moment where God is calling. If you're listening to me, God is calling you. I guarantee it. Because I'm not doing this for my health. I can tell you that. This is not super fun for me. Somebody asked me, they said, why do you go on social media? Why did you even open an account? And it was as if, because it was from a point of judgment. And I said, I actually opened my accounts to stalk my children. I didn't open it because I wanted to be seen. I opened it to make sure they weren't seen in ways that I didn't want them to be. And that worked, but then they grew and, now, tables have probably switched, but, but yeah, that's why I have social media. So I'm not on here, like, now it's not really a big deal, but I didn't come here to be seen. I came here to help my children first and foremost, but then it's become something else. It's become something completely different. And now I feel like I'm a private investigator for God, and I'm out here trying to share his word with you and let you know that, no matter what you've done in the past, because like I said, I was a sinner. I guess maybe I don't think I am right now, but I could see myself in the future potentially being a sinner again, here or there. We all do. We all have moments, and God understands that, but he's calling you. Like I said, if you're listening to me, he's calling you. And I hope some of these realizations that I've had help you to realize that there is something grander here. There is something bigger that has planned various different things that we cannot even begin to explain. As a matter of fact, if you don't believe me, look into gematria. I'll just leave that with you. Google gematria and look into that. If you think that there isn't some sort of grander scheme, grander plan by something bigger than all of us, I think you're mistaken, for sure. Anyway, so until next time, my friends, keep on healing.